Hello, everybody. Folks here and see me. I can get a thumbs up from our Zoom crowd. That would be easy. Uh, Thank you all for joining us, both some folks here in person, as well as virtually. We're super excited and happy to have you. Thank you for joining us. This is the public release meeting for the Southern Boulevard Brownfield Opportunity Area Nomination Study. We've been very grateful for the participation of some folks throughout the course of the study, but also glad to see new faces interested in this work. The study is an exciting opportunity to articulate a shared vision for the future of our neighborhoods, particularly through the lens of identifying and inventorying vacant and underutilized property. And potentially contaminated properties called brownfield sites. Looking at those sites, we were able to outline some community-informed recommendations for the cleanup and remediation of any contamination and the equitable redevelopment of these properties in our area and in our neighborhood. This is work that YMPJ has been doing for the past couple of years, so we're really pleased to share it out. And I'm going to start just by walking us through an agenda. Sorry, if you can go back, Shruti. One, we spent some time. Thank you for hanging out in this room, doing some welcoming and introductions. What we're going to do is walk through a presentation that really mirrors the study. So it'll help you know what's in the study, how to read it, and we'll also share some of our findings and recommendations from the study. But think of this as just like a primer, and we invite everybody to go down on the study, read it more thoroughly, send us your comments, feedback, questions. So with that, Shruti, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I need to start off by saying a big thank you to the New York State Department of State. The New York State Department of State is the agency in New York State that provided us with the funding to do this study through the Brownfield Opportunity Area Program. What it does is provides technical assistance to develop area-wide community-based plans to effectively redevelop vacant and abandoned sites, transforming them into catalytic properties that facilitate community investment and improvement. As I said, this is work that YMPJ has been doing since 2023. This offers a critical opportunity to capture community concerns about affordability, the environmental impacts of underutilized space, and articulate a community vision for our strategic sites. Looking at the next slide, I just want to sort of talk about, who's been involved. The BOA study, again, established a shared vision and guiding principles for the future development of the study area through collaborative and community-driven processes with residents, stakeholders, and local organizations. So you can see our steering committee, which has been with us since the beginning of this study. They include some folks you might be familiar with from our elected officials' offices, also from different departments at the city level, Department of Transportation, Department of City Planning, and I know some of our steering committee members are represented here in person, but also on Zoom. We thank you for joining us. Since the beginning, we've also, been talking to a variety of different residents, some who have been involved on the full length of the study, others who have come and gone, and we're glad to see new faces. Nice to see you. We also are supported in this work by a consultant team led by Aeneid Architects, and you'll meet some of our consultant team members as we go through the presentation. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, we informed by that steering committee's participation in all the community engagement activities that we've done during the course of this study. That included like tabling at Bronx River Family Day or at some of YMPJ's events under the Bruckner Expressway at a site we call the Soundview Economic Hub. We arrived at these three primary goals for the Southern Boulevard BOA study, anchored in a commitment to inclusive and community-driven growth, which prioritize an approach and strategy that improves quality of life, enhances equity, and builds long-term resilience. So what our goals are for the study and the plans that are coming out of it are really to build healthy, livable communities, to build climate resilient communities, and to make sure we're doing so in an inclusive way. And we'll talk a little bit more about these later in the presentation. But for now, I just want to talk about sort of the study map, right? This is a look at what we call the study area, right here in our neighborhood on either side of the Bronx River. And as we were working through this, we identified three clusters or sub areas. Each one builds on its sort of locational advantages, its strengths. And also each one is oriented at addressing at least one of those community goals or needs that I mentioned before. So some area A is a little bit more transit oriented and housing density, especially looking at, how can we ensure 100% affordable housing development in this area that we've already seen in recent years has had plenty of new buildings come up right next to the Whitlock's 6 train station, as well as YMPJ's Cass Gilbert train station project. Sub-area 2, or B rather, is focused on waterfront activation and community infrastructure, especially looking at opportunities to expand waterfront access, provide housing, but also make pedestrian improvements along Bronx River Avenue so folks can traverse the east side of the waterfront, maybe not as prettily as over in Cottonwood Plant Park, but hopefully we can build towards some of that. The last area, sub-area C, is our economic hub area, where we're hoping we can foster new businesses and job training programs in tech, light manufacturing, and the green economy. For folks, familiar with that portion of our study area, sub-area C is already fairly industrial, post-industrial, and some of our questions are about how can we bring cleaner industries there. Within each of these three sub areas, we inventoried all the property, and on the next slide you'll see that we were able to identify 4 strategic sites that sort of we took a little bit of design work and put it in there. We did our community engagement around what do folks think these different areas could be, and we'll go through these more thoroughly later in the presentation. But I guess what I want to say is that you should think of these projects, potential projects, these remediation and redevelopment opportunities, as more illustrative of community needs and priorities than final products. Of course, we're recommending them as strategic sites. We're going to pursue sort of game planning. What are the next steps with these particular sites? But overall, they should be considered illustrative of the vision and the community input that we've gathered. So just wanted to highlight that there. But I think we could go on ahead and move to the next slide. And I'll pass it off to Amy from the ENEA team to share here about the study.
Hi, thank you, Reese. Yes, so as Reese said, we'd like to just walk you through the structure of the report and give you a sense of what you will see and how to read that information. So we have 5 main parts. We have an executive summary that gives you an overview of the report, and then 4 robust sections within that. First is a project description and boundary, and that gives a definition of the study area, describes the contributors and the process. Then we have section 2, community engagement, which describes the community participation process and offers analysis of the input and feedback received during these meetings and workshops. And those have, we've identified the key outcomes that inform the project. Section 3, existing conditions analysis. This shares with you an evaluation and analysis of existing conditions within the study region, which is larger than the study area. And it also has opportunities and reuse potential for properties that are within the BOA study area. So this analysis, which includes aspects of community and regional context, economic and market trends, environmental reviews, leads to specific and realistic recommendations, which are in section 4, final recommendations. So these are a set of recommendations and strategies for reuse and redevelopment opportunities on potential brownfields, as well as overall needs for the BOA study area. This is a dense report, right? It's 190 pages. So that is why we'd like to, use this opportunity to explain it and then invite you to review it thoroughly yourselves. So project description. This section defines the extent of the study area and process for shaping an actionable vision. YMPJ, in partnership with the New York State Department of State, is leading the nomination study. It's a milestone and an ongoing process to restore and revitalize conditions adjacent to the Bronx River in the Southern Boulevard region. This photo of Concrete Plant Park, which is within the study region, but not specifically part of the study area, for strategic recommendations. It's indicative of the momentum and support for community-informed development in this neighborhood to reclaim the waterfront and revitalize the area. A history of discriminatory policies placing polluting industries and infrastructure in the South Bronx and along the Bronx River have led to severe public health impacts and economic decline. Community activists and organizations like YMPJ have worked for decades to clean up the river and advocate for environmental justice in the larger community. The Southern Boulevard BOA study area includes 62 acres with nearly 50 potential brownfield sites. Recommended improvements and strategies for redevelopment outlined in the report are intended to meet community needs like affordable housing, jobs, and open space, while boosting economic conditions and reclaiming the waterfront as a vital economic and environmental asset. So to just touch on the intention and scope of the BOA program, which is how this study has come to be. The intention and scope of the BOA program is to provide communities with grant funding and technical assistance to develop area-wide community-based plans for effectively redevelop brownfields and other vacant or abandoned sites. Brownfields are real property that is abandoned, unused, or underused due to known or suspected contamination that complicates redevelopment. When New York's industrial economy declined, industries that fled to other states and countries left behind a legacy of contamination, which created pockets of neglect, disinvestment, vacancy, and abandonment, many of which exist within disadvantaged communities. So brownfield site designation can help advance development opportunities or make it more accessible to community members. The first step in that process is what we're doing now, the nomination study. This study will progress into support for pre-development planning and phase 2 environmental site assessments. The program is structured to think about the neighborhood scale and base our specific site development recommendations on a shared community vision. So the Southern Boulevard BOA envisions a model of equitable, sustainable neighborhood development where Bronx residents access affordable housing, quality jobs, and a healthy environment. Through a community-driven process, the study created a roadmap for equitable development rooted in local priorities and climate resilience. The report compiled previously completed studies that have informed and guided the BOA study. So you can find a summary of each in section 1.5. The recommendations and strategies of the BOA area study in this report are in line with key recommendations found here as well, such as increasing affordable housing and improving pedestrian cyclist conditions, as well as environmental improvements.
Hi everyone, this is Sapna. I'm going to be going over the community engagement section, which is the chapter 2 of the report. So we'll just share a preview of what this chapter includes, which is the approach that we employed for engagement, details on groups that were engaged, a summary of the input that was gathered, as well as how community input shaped the final outcomes of the project. So, a little bit about our approach to ensure a really inclusive and far-reaching process. Our methodology really built upon the existing relationships that YMPJ already had in the community, strengthened trust with the community, and also helped form new connections. As many of you steering committee members are already aware, working with the steering committee through the process was really instrumental in shaping the project outcomes. We had several steering committee meetings, which are interspersed with public meeting touch points at key community milestones, project milestones. We had an inclusive stakeholder mapping, and we really listened to what community members had to say and documented what was shared. Our approach was centered on transparency, being clear about what was possible within this process. We made sure to provide easily understood materials, given that this was a technical concept to grapple with and a complicated site area to work with. We tried to share all of this with creativity and really tried to create a sense of community joy and stewardship in shaping the future of the area. On the next slide, just sharing, we did a variety of formats to engage with the public, anything from surveys to open houses, focus groups, going out at local community events, and also collaborating on ongoing processes, such as the work that YMPJ is doing with the Soundview Economic Hub, which you will hear about a little bit more later in the presentation, as well as partnership with local institutions, such as the Fannie Lou Hamer Freedom High School. We had both in-person engagement as well as virtual formats, and meetings were conducted in English and Spanish. We made sure to provide childcare and refreshments from local businesses. Community feedback was reviewed with care and was a key factor of the project decision-making process. So, when you go through the report, you'll see a summary of all the engagement touch points, detail of the formats, and the input that we gathered at each of those sessions. Going to the next slide, we wanted to just elaborate a little bit more on the goals that Reese had introduced in the start of the presentation. The 3 goals each have objectives that were shaped by community input. So the first one, healthy, livable communities, which is about improving the overall quality of life of the residents, which was very central to the vision for the future development of the area. And some objectives within this included improvements to streetscapes, open spaces, sidewalks, improving safety, resiliency, and connectivity through that. Also increased access to healthcare, some examples such as mobile health clinics, wellness events, integrating health services into new developments were some strategies that have been proposed in the report. Also increased access to fresh food, improving transportation access by both expanding networks and improving the sense of safety. And then finally, last but not the least, really supporting and enhancing local arts and culture. On the next slide, the second goal, climate resiliency, strategies for both at the site as well as the neighborhood scale. And some of these include infrastructural improvements to address both flooding and sewer outflows, reducing heat vulnerability through landscape improvements, green roofs, etc., increasing renewable energy sources through sustainable systems, and then finally remediating contaminated sites to reduce environmental and public health risks. Again, this is just a snapshot of everything. There's a lot in the report, and we're trying to give you an overview of the material that you'll find in the report. So with that, the final goal emphasizes inclusive and equitable development, just making sure that long-term residents and small businesses can remain and thrive as the area evolves. We want to make sure that we're promoting affordable housing, retail that serves the neighborhood, and community facilities to be prioritized for underutilized end zone sites. We want to make sure we're supporting locally owned retail and community resources on the key commercial corridors in the area, especially along Westchester Avenue. And then prioritizing small business development, especially around green industries. And then finally, encouraging community reinvestment acts, the CRA commitments in the area to support access to housing, local business growth, and needs for financial services. And again, in Chapter 4, you'll see how these goals and objectives, created with community partnership helped inform the vision and concepts for the strategic site. So you'll see how the whole thread then connects to that. With that, I'm going to pass it to Lynn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lynn Chong from HRA Advisors, and I'll be kicking off the overview of Chapter 3, which is the existing conditions analysis. So as Amy has mentioned a little bit earlier, this chapter really focuses on what are the current conditions of the study region today, which is the larger area that surrounds the BOA designation study area. And the analysis is really the purpose of the analysis for us to understand, what is going on within the region in terms of population, employment, real estate, and fiscal conditions. And this would really inform how we shape our recommendations at our strategic sites. So to provide a quick overview, first, this is sort of the distinction between study region and area that we have been alluding to multiple times. And so what you can see in orange, the smaller study area is where the sites have been selected from. But this larger gray boundary that you see highlighted around is the study region where a lot of the data has been collected. And the reason we look at this larger region is because it provides more data points and allows us to do a more accurate analysis, but it also allows us to look at some of the larger trends that are impacting the study area. So when we're looking at the region, there's about 75,000 people that are currently living in this region today. And there's been about a 10% population growth in the last decade compared to just 6% growth in the Bronx. So the population has been growing faster. And in terms of jobs, there is around 10,500 jobs as of today and around 13% job growth in the last 10 years, which is a little bit slower compared to the 29% growth in the Bronx. And our first key finding from the existing conditions analysis is that there are over 670,000 square feet of vacant and underutilized sites in the study region. And so what this says is that there are plenty of opportunities, and also there's an urgency in terms of being able to do this study because, this essentially means 670,000 square feet of sites that could be leveraged for, increased public benefits, more job creation, and all the things that could really benefit the area. The second key finding is that housing production in the region has been significant since 2010, which is also in line with some of the housing growth that's been happening borough-wide in the Bronx. And so in the study region alone, there's been 3,600 housing units added in the last 10 years or so, which actually makes up nearly 7% of all housing units that have been delivered in the Bronx. And so that's a significant portion that's been invested in this region. And kind of digging in a little bit deeper, there's also an additional nearly 2,000 units of affordable housing that have been developed in the area, kind of focusing on the northwest and also the southeast side of the study region. And when we say affordable housing, a lot of these developments have been for an area median income of 0% to 165% of area median income. And so there's a range of, affordable, very deeply affordable to middle income households that have been developed here. But one thing that's important to note is that despite this development, a lot of residents are still struggling to afford a lot of the housing that's been developed. So on that note, it's really important to understand that, despite the growth in affordable housing, the housing is still unaffordable for a lot of residents today. And so just to kind of dive into that point a little bit further, there are about 90% of the total population in the region are renters as of today, and 60% of the renter population is currently cost burdened. And by this, we mean that residents are paying more than 30% of their gross income on housing costs. And really exacerbating this housing affordability problem is that 60% of the housing stock is actually built prior to 1950. And so the fact that there's an aging housing stock means housing maintenance costs are becoming more expensive, and there's just a limited number of housing that are becoming available for future renters. And the two charts here you're seeing are showing that, rent values and housing values are just increasing over time. And due to these changes in demographics, housing conditions, and growing market pressures, residents within the study region are actually within one of the highest risks of displacement citywide. And according to the study of displacement conducted by New York City, this threshold is kind of based on population vulnerability calculated by, whether residents are rent burdened, how's the poverty rate, and what are sort of the conditions of the current housing stock. And the fifth key finding is that the study area is largely zoned for manufacturing industrial uses, but the study region as a whole faces growing pressures for affordable housing. So as you can see within the red boundary, the smaller study area, you can see that most of them is color purple, which means that it's zoned for manufacturing or industrial uses. And this is supported by the data, which shows that there's been a 62% growth in industrial jobs in the region, which is much faster than the growth of industrial jobs in the Bronx. And kind of conversely, there's been a decline in non-industrial jobs. And so what we can tell from this data is that the study area really is a hub for industrial and manufacturing jobs and is supporting the region in that way. But to kind of complement that job creation, there needs to be a lot more affordable housing investment that needs to come around sort of these job centers in the future. And I'll pass it to Amy.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Well, so also, while there are considerable new green and open spaces in the study region, waterfront access on the east side of the river remains rather limited. So Section 4 strategies will aim to improve access and restoration along the river's edge. Public realm improvements are needed throughout the study area, including widened sidewalks, enhanced bicycle lanes, and accessibility improvements to enhance pedestrian flow to these access points. On the left map, it shows the pedestrian and cyclist safety, and our greatest safety concern is at the intersection of Westchester Avenue and Bronx River Avenue. So this is also a zone where we are advocating for better access and pedestrian, plaza and sidewalk improvements. Reese, would you like to pick it up?
Yeah, definitely. So like Amy was mentioning before, the study was informed by other studies that New York City's been doing, that YMPJ's been doing, that sort of thing. But like in the same way that we look at those studies, we look at what's happening on the ground as well. There's been a lot of recent developments in the area over the past many years. Of course, the transformation of Starlight Park stands out, but also, new buildings going up along the Sheridan Boulevard, and some of YMPJ's own work. And so I just wanted to call out here that we're considering, what is happening in the city already, or in the neighborhood already as we're making these recommendations. But, wanted to take a quick opportunity to shout out YMPJ's projects. First, the Soundview Economic Hub, which is included in our study area, is over 30,000 square feet of underutilized space underneath the Bruckner Expressway. At Bronx River Avenue, underneath Bruckner Expressway at Bronx River Avenue, it's a space that we call the Soundview Economic Hub. So here on the left, you're seeing what that area looked like in the past. And just this past year, in 2024, YMPJ was able to activate that space with a public art installation, bringing a variety of different programming to the site, book launch, different vendor markets, spectacular Halloween-themed activity, and we're continuing to do that. So I'm actually really excited to share that later this month, on the 28th, Sunday the 28th, we'll be having the first ever Bronx flea market underneath there with our partners at VIP. Thanks for the class person there. So yeah, we really want to bring you to the space, but also included it in this study because it's important to consider, what are the things that YMPJ as an organization is working on, and how these new locations like the Soundview Economic Hub, which we hope will be a small business incubator space, a space that's supporting our local entrepreneurs, a space that continues to host art, but also, potentially a space where we can have like a micro mobility hub and work with Amazon or others and try to do more last mile deliveries. So we're continuing to remove polluting truck traffic off of our streets. Want to include this information for you all so that you know what we're up to, but you also understand why we included it in this study, sort of representative of our overall work. The next project, which folks may be familiar with, is the vacant Cass Gilbert train station at Westchester Avenue. And this site is currently owned by Amtrak, originally built in 1912, abandoned in 1937, and has sat empty since 1937. So we're coming up close on 80, 90 years plus. I want to say something that was really exciting about including this in the Southern Boulevard BOA was that we were actually able to take advantage of some of the resources through the New York State Department of State for the study to get us inside the station. So here you're seeing a picture of the inside taken in 2024, where we went with an architect, engineer, materials conservationist to sort of work through the next step of how do we redevelop this site. And that's something I want to sit on for a second here, just explain that this project at the Westchester Avenue train station is sort of illustrative of the work that we will need to do on the other strategic sites moving into the future. YMPJ has been working on this project sort of with the intensity that we have been since 2020, 2021, 2022. We've done like redevelopment planning, studies, cost estimates. We're going to get new cost estimates, new renderings, community engagement about what are the potential uses for the space. We're imagining it based on that vision as a multi-purpose community facility that could sort of fill a missing link along the Westchester Avenue commercial corridor, but also serve as an important stop along the Bronx River Greenway, and add public amenities that don't currently exist in Concrete Plant Park, like public restrooms, Wi-Fi. So we see it as a really versatile location, and we want to continue working with you all to see it happen. And there will be no doubt more to come on that in the future. But I just want to say that you can see some pictures from our community engagement here at the bottom. Some of the drawings that have been done or visioning around public art installations around the site. So I say that all to say that these strategic sites that we're considering as part of the study will ultimately have to go through similar processes of community engagement, of market analysis, and the rest. but I think I'll hand it off there or to myself. Hand it off to myself. So the last section, of the report, chapter 4 speaks to the final recommendations that the study makes, and so we're gonna walk through this section right now. Um, Again, keeping our goals and objectives, healthy, livable communities, climate resiliency, inclusive development, front and center as we're making these recommendations. But we're going to go on to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about, you saw the study area map, and how did we ultimately narrow and identify those properties that we felt like had the most potential to consider them as strategic sites for this study. You'd see, we had to filter down from 137 parcels. And we looked at things like parcels that contain uses that you wouldn't want to move, right? An existing school, we wouldn't want to do anything with that. Parks, we have beautiful parks, some of which are, brand spanking new. So we're not going to recommend any changes in those areas. We also, are not going to look at parcels that we know are already in development or have plans. We did, however, want to look at parcels that had a lot size of like 10,000 square feet or greater, because that sort of represents a lot of area to be able to remediate it and potentially redevelop. And then we also did not include parcels with less than a 33% utilization, or we did include, somebody correct me on the team there, did include parcels with a less than 33% utilization rate, because that's sort of a ratio of the building area versus the land area of the property. And so the utilization is less than that 33% rate, then there's significantly less built area for a wider or bigger land area. And so we think that there's opportunities there to more fully build out the property. So on the next slide, I'm just sort of continuing through this winnowing process that we did, sort of bringing it down to the strategic sites that we selected. So based on that initial criteria, got it down to something close like 30 sites that we think have strong redevelopment potential. And then, we sort of compressed even more. Before I move from this slide, I just want to say that this list and this whole process of identifying the sites is spelled out really well in the body of the study. So, I'd encourage you to read through that section if you're curious. But this list doesn't go anywhere. Just because we picked, 4 strategic sites doesn't mean that these properties don't still exist, that they don't also have potential. And so as we continue to move forward in our, community development work, our community planning work, hopefully together with you all, we want to keep these in mind, sort of in our back pocket. But to speak about the strategic sites that we did select in the end, we felt it was important to pick 1 or 2 strategic sites per sub area. So again, and also we were looking at, sort of points to consider, like site availability. Who is the current owner? Is it public or private? Development feasibility. What's the current use? What's the current zoning? What's the current building age? Those sorts of things. Market strength, for example. And then we also talked about the impact. What's the job creation potential? What's the affordable housing potential when we consider these 4 strategic sites? So we have 1 in sub area A, which again was really oriented towards housing. 2 in sub area B, really focused on waterfront activation and community infrastructure. And 1 in sub area C, focused on sort of economic development with job creation potential. So looking at the sites, this is a look at some of the renderings we did. Again, the exact locations of the sites. but we'll go through them one by one here. So the next slide takes a look at a site on Home and on Home Street, on Home and Longfellow Avenue. These sites are 5 lots, and of course they were stood out to us because of their location. They're surrounded by residential neighborhoods, close to the 6 chain, so they're close to transit. The recommendation is proposed combining the 5 lots here into one contiguous lot, like large parcel, and rezoning it for residential use, and or also rezoning site 20. And I just want to highlight that, you know, here the sites are owned publicly by the NYC BEC, and so we feel like there's, you know, a unique opportunity to work with the EDC and our other partners at the city, Department of City Planning and others, about, you know, how can we utilize 4 of these sites that are owned by EDC, but then there's also a private owner on the 5th site. We you know, talk about some of the features like green roof, sidewalk improvements, but the real question is what's happening inside. So the aim, again, with this strategic site, with this, you know, redevelopment potential idea, is to provide 100% affordable housing and support community needs for retail, especially you know, our local small businesses, but also potentially public services, health clinics and other things, with a sort of ground floor retail opportunity. And then, you know, just make continued public realm improvements, lighting, sidewalk cleanliness, that sort of thing. So I'm going to pass it to Amy to speak just a little bit about some of the considerations as far as the zoning and the height of the building, and then we'll move on to the next strategic site.
Thank you. Actually, do you mind if we go back one slide for a second? Thanks, Rudy. So just to point out that the site on the north side, those are the 5 lots together, and we're looking at bulk that represents an R7 zoning, which I'll talk about a second in the next slide. But on the south side, site 20D is what it's labeled. That's our own like inventory number for these sites. That site also has potential for housing, and it's owned by the city. So in the report, you'll see some bulk ideas for that, as well as some pretty exciting student studies they took on the site, and explored opportunities for housing and residential development there. So yes, on the next one, this is the basis of the unit mix that we were looking at per the amount of floor area that we think makes sense. The massing, the rendering that's shown up as the larger image up there shows 5 to 6 floors that would be in line with the adjacent buildings, and then we'd have a setback and we'd go up another 3 or 4 floors above that. So that helps to kind of keep light access down to the street, and it, you know, feels like it fits in with the neighborhood a little bit better. The other housing developments in the Bronx that we were just kind of comparing these to in some of our previous meetings, we have the Eliza and Inwood, and not in Bronx, and then the Jerome Court and Morris Heights. And these are slightly denser developments, so this will be slightly less height and number of units, but it's still kind of comparable. You can see the Eliza in orange on the footprint of our sites on the map, and you see the footprint of Jerome Court if it were to be on our site. So just to give you a sense of the density, we're recommending something that's a little bit more spread out here.
I think we skipped one maybe. Oh, there we go. All right, perfect. So that was, you know, we were just discussing the strategic site in sub area 1. Now we're looking at the strategic site in sub area, or sub area A. Now we're looking at the strategic site as sub area B. The Pass Gilbert Westchester Avenue Station. So I talked about this a little bit before, but we are looking to restore and redevelop this historic train station into a community facility, while also making improvements like a bridge from the station into Concrete Plant Park. Also, there's a potential for decking here, which we'd like to explore further in the future. Safer pedestrian and cyclist crossing along the Bronx River Greenway. But again, on the inside of the building, really focused on local small businesses, community-based organizations who might be able to take advantage, or high schools or other groups who might be able to take advantage of a sort of multi-use flexible space. You're getting some looks at the building here. Of course, I think folks are familiar. The last thing I want to say is just that this site is one that's real special to us, and one that you're going to be hearing about more going forward. And so want to invite you to stay engaged on that. The next strategic site 2.2, is just across from the vacant Pass Gilbert train station. On the other side, it's currently an empty parking lot. You can see some of those photos up top. It does have some use, but we think that there's opportunity to increase waterfront access at this site, as well as really build a sort of location for retail, recreation, community art, maybe restaurants, maybe cafes, potentially a green roof or other elevations to be able to look at Bronx River and see Concrete Plant Park, the Westchester Avenue Station, and to the rest of our sort of beautiful corridor along the Bronx River. We dive into more detail on all these strategic sites in the report. I also just want to highlight for this site here, 2.2, as well as the next site, strategic site 3. We consider housing as well on these sites. We heard an overwhelming need for affordable housing from the folks we spoke to. And so although these renderings don't show housing, we do discuss, the potential for housing on these sites, as part of the overall study. Here we're looking at a strategic site along sort of Bronx River Avenue and Story Ave, with Close Ave there in the middle. We imagine that these buildings here, and the reason they're grouped together, so they're owned by the same owner. These buildings here present, a great opportunity to lean into the industrial character of the area, but also perhaps put these lots, which are currently sort of just storage for scaffolding materials or trucks, put them into economic and industrial use, but maybe it's light industry, or maybe it's green manufacturing. Some of these industries that we could pair with job training programs or other things to help sort of give folks in our neighborhood the tools to enter the workforce in the green economy. Also, there's hopefully synergies with a site like this to the Soundview Economic Hub, and this is also an area that has seen more housing in recent years. So its industrial character is sort of in flux right now, and we think that we can bring sort of clean, green economy oriented work to these areas. So I'll stop there, pass it back to Amy just to talk about some of the area-wide recommendations we make. You know, of course, all of the recommendations made in the study, some are location specific, some are area-wide, but they all work together and closely build off of each other. So if there's things that feel repetitive, that's by design. We want to really hammer home, you know, what the priorities and the community vision that we heard during the course of the study process, you know, was. So Amy, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, that's right. I think that we have area-wide recommendations that align with the community goals and objectives. And when the strategic sites could really fulfill those well based on their location or capacity, then we wanted to make a point of including that in the program recommendations or the siting opportunities. So, you know, for example, with health services on the left, what we're looking at are 10-minute walk radiuses. Actually, for health services, we did 15-minute walk radiuses. And then for food resources, we were looking at 10-minute and just kind of identifying where some of the gaps are. And our sites really do have an opportunity to fulfill that. So we do have overall area-wide recommendations that address food access and increased health services, but we are also advocating for them included in the project sites. And same for the bike access and e-scooter and bike access. So we're showing, you know, existing conditions of city bike docks and proposed. We also have a proposed series of organized e-scooter corrals on the area east of the river. This is to help improve connectivity. And we're also proposing to expand the MTA free bus pilot. On the right, looking at flood resiliency needs, we're proposing area-wide partnership with DEP to implement green infrastructure that manages runoff from streets and combined sewer overflows, as well as area-wide recommendations to plant shade trees to reduce heat vulnerability, support solar panels and energy efficiency, and enroll eligible sites in the New York State Brownfield Cleanup Program to support remediation and unlock redevelopment incentives. So, you know, to recap, the report is a collection of recommendations for the area and development strategies that seek to meet this community's vision for the future of the Bronx. We hope that you will take the opportunity to pore through the full report, ask us questions, and offer your thoughts and suggestions.
Thank you. Yeah. So now I'm going to talk about next steps, and you know, one of the things that I think you'll find in the report is that, you know, not only do we have these recommendations and these exciting you know, strategic sites, but it's also a unique and updated look, sort of a most up-to-date look around some of the statistics, some of the sort of existing conditions in the neighborhood. So we're really proud of that analytical work, but also, you know, the community engagement we've done, and it's sort of piling that all into this community vision. So on the next slide, I think I share some information about how folks can contribute. This is actually going to be October 20th. But it might get pushed back just to allow people some more time too. We'll of course keep folks updated around when the final day to submit any comments and feedback is. But the full report is available at YMPJ's website, www.ympj.org/Southern Boulevard Brownfield Opportunity Area Study. It's a lot to type in, but just you can type in Southern Boulevard BOA, it should pop up. It's a big study, as Amy said, 190 some pages. So, you know, if you need to take it in chunks, we invite that. Comments can be submitted via email at brownfields@ympj.org. And I also want to say that, you know, if folks want to take some more time, sit down with a certain section of the report, ask questions, you know, I'm always here. My office is just in the front. And so, you know, we'll be happy to sit down and talk with folks about the report. What's next? The public comments will be incorporated into the final report, which will be submitted to the New York State Department of State as part of the BOA nomination study. And I've seen a question here in the chat. I know we'll get to questions in a second. Will the report also be available in print? We can certainly make it available for folks in print. But it is, you know, right there on the website too. You can either view it on the webpage or download it. So, you know, comments can be sent to brownfields@ympj.org. You can also email me or that Brownfields email to you know, set up some time to talk about it a little bit more. I see a question here.
Yes, you know, in English.
Right now, yes, it is only available in English. So, I don't know if that's something that, you know, we have the capacity to translate, but certainly can speak with the Department of State to see about, you know, what resources they have to support something like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's an important question. We've you know, throughout the process have tried to be very inclusive as far as our language access. You know, today, you know, nobody usually will have in the sign up, you know, or you need interpretation services, that sort of thing. So we didn't prepare for it today, but it's an important question, you know, something we were thinking about. On the next slide, I just want to say that, you know, overall, where are we, right? We're making the final recommendations. So again, this has been sort of the close of a almost 3 year long study process. And what will happen next is that the report with all of your comments and feedback incorporated, and also all of the comments and feedback from the New York State Department of State will sort of the final draft will be shared with the Department of State. We will learn if the area receives what's called a Brownfield Opportunity Area designation. So again, this is a nomination study to receive a designation, which then unlocks resources from the New York State Department of State to do different pre-development activities like market analysis or other things that would help us forward some of these potential projects. But also it sort of affirms the commitment of New York State, YMPJ, the members of our steering committee, and others to realize and work towards the goals outlined in the study. So yeah, now we'll open it up to some Q&A. I don't know if there's hands in the room on Zoom or questions in the chat. So Shruti, maybe I'll hand it off to you, and we'll get to some questions here in person if there are any as well.
Sure. We don't have any hands raised yet, but please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions, share your thoughts, comments, those online or those in person.
They're making them news. Folks are curious about if they've in the chat. I did. Oh, sure. I'll start off. Yeah. I'll say you want to introduce yourself. Sure. Yeah. Not sure her name is, but my name is Jeremiah Pearson. Jeremiah, I can't think of Pearson. I'm a resident of the Longwood neighborhood, right at the intersection of Cortona East and Longwood. So I'm like right near Boston Road, you look down, there's 30-minute walk to where. Thank you all for taking the time to present social extensive and well prepared. I mean, study, and it's obviously been a lot of work put into it. So thank you for that. As somebody who's experienced displacement in New York City, and living in a shelter environment for the year time. It's good to see that there are efforts being made to mitigate displacement, and I like that you guys are using we take time to find underutilized sites to restore and install new things so that the community are more engaged and there's clearly a lot of good things in the works. I don't really have any questions for you. I just thought that was something all the same. But thank you. More so it's like I didn't know that so much work is happening, and it makes me feel a little better about my community, knowing that you guys are implementing so much time to this improvement area, make it more safe, medical, and meet the lots of needs. Like they, and the shelter, not even years ago, but like a year from it. But today I was at a shelter, and now I'm living on my mood and I have that space. So it's like good for others. It's good, makes me feel better about the upcoming generations that their efforts being made to mitigate displacement outside it should be displaced on Earth. We all have the eggs or hands. So yeah. So thank you. Appreciate that question. So if you're like a 5-year or 10-year plan, or that's something that will your is that the attorney? Yeah, we will. And so one of them it's about to. Yeah, that's a great question. The question again for folks on Zoom was, what's next? Is there sort of a 5-year plan, 10-year plan? What happens after this? YMPJ has been very strategic in working with its government partners and securing the resources to do this sort of work. And so what I can say, and something I want to invite you all to be part of going forward, is that while we're finishing this state level study, this document will really be our guiding light going forward. We're about to start a study at the federal level with the EPA to do sort of a brownfield redevelopment action plan. So we'll look at each of those specific strategic sites and outline exactly, what are the steps to get to their redevelopment. What's that look like on a 5-year timeline? So, there's this is sort of just the beginning in some ways, and we're very glad to have this as something that we can constantly return back to. Just say, here's the work we're doing right now, matching up and aligning with the things that we said we wanted to be focused on, and that's in so many regards, right? Not just with the strategic sites, but in our advocacy in the neighborhood. In our, broader work as an organization, are we, meeting the things we set in this report of that Ministries into it? Yeah. So I'm guessing we will have those types. So this is basically the blueprint of everything. They all start finalizing and actually take action. Right. It comes to that, right? How long does it take for? How long do you all expect we're excited to take? Let's say like 3 months, a year, 5 years, or something. Yeah, so the Brownfield redevelopment action plan that I mentioned is an upcoming project building off of this work will take about a year, 2 years. And like I said, we'd love for you to be involved in it. At a previous meeting YMPJ hosted for interested volunteers, we shared about a group that we'd like to stand up, sort of a community advisory committee that'll meet more regularly. And so, want to invite people to join that if they're interested, really focused on this brownfield work. Yeah, as we sort of jump into that next study, we'll be sure to share out any relevant information, the timelines, that sort of thing. And, we'd love for folks to be a part of that process from the ground floor areas. Yes.
Daniel, now just like to relax. That I have 2 questions. The first one is around affordable housing. Since am I a useless indicator for affordability? Do you have something already set in in here that's different that counters AMI, or like a set? Just curious about something included.
Yeah, I might pass that to Lynn in a second, but I'll just say that we definitely appreciate sort of the limits that AMI as a measure of affordability, and so some of the report does discuss what are alternative modes, and there's also a real trust in the report, I think, to prioritize ownership, both home ownership opportunities, but also business ownership opportunities. And so we look at things like community land trusts, cooperative building, cooperative buildings, that sort of thing, as alternatives to sort of traditional rented housing. But yeah, I don't know then if you have any more you'd like to share about sort of AMI and any weariness around AMI metrics.
Yeah, the AMI measure definitely, I mean, I think it's kind of a policy tool in terms of housing that New York City uses to require a certain amount of inclusionary housing in in developments. But I think New York City and the state and anyone who's involved in the planning process and development understands that AMI is not the only solution to providing affordable housing. It is just the beginning to require a certain amount of inclusionary and affordable housing. So I think, as Reese mentioned, it's the starting point for new developments that allows developers to kind of put in a certain amount, but there are definitely additional measures, both from the city and from developers and also community organizations that have to come together to really ensure that affordability is both preserved, but also can be continued within the community.
So, is there any way that we can help publicize this? I don't know if you like still planning them looking at interviews or get the word out. Is there any way, like, you said the advisory committee?
Yeah, it's definitely so. We'd love for folks to be able to share this with people who might be interested in their own lives, families, friends, neighbors, folks that work in the area. We will be doing additional sort of engagement with folks, letting people know when we're out and about in the neighborhood that this study is available for them to review and read. Like I said, I am making myself available to sit down with folks and sort of walk through the study. I'll be sure to get some printed versions here at YMPJ's office. I think when I think of some of the local organizations in this area, would be happy to visit you or otherwise. Residents, again, welcome to come here anytime, speak with me about the project. And the report is available on our website. We also were featured in a story on city limits this morning, announcing the publication of the study. So, we're trying to get the word out there. Definitely want people to be engaged. Also, want to caution people from thinking that, unless there's some significant uproar, this study is mostly done. We're going to be incorporating feedback, probably largely in the appendix, and then also if there's any errors, be sure to correct those. So that's definitely something we want to see from folks. If there are errors that folks notice, wanting to be able to get those and fix them for the final version. My concern, I didn't mention my name, I just are right here, right? My main concern, like we already know about the affordable housing and stuff that you're building there. Is it just what you said for that one, or what's the other banks where the other, I think it was 3 spots? I might have missed it personally. Right. I will look there. No, yeah, you were asking about the strategic sites, right? Yeah. So we know from Blue Blood that it's going to be like, it was that big lot of big acre land, basically, that you also, you're factoring affordable housing and small business and stuff. So it's like, what are the other ones? Maybe I wasn't clear. So the second strategic site, strategic site 2.1 was of course the Westchester Avenue extension. That one is and maybe sure to if you could switch back to those slides. That is a the vision there is a multi-use, one back to the Westchester Avenue station, sorry. Multi-use community facility. This is one that I can talk about for days. So I'll sort of leave it there. This is the restoration of a historic building, to as best as we can save the architecture and everything else, and also put it to a new use, which it hasn't had since 1937, as sort of a multi-use space. The next, the other question. No. Let's say so. Basically, a restoration of the land to make sure it's not only kept up, but also had that same historic background. Right, exactly. And we hope it'll function at the intersection of the commercial corridor along Westchester Avenue, presenting an opportunity for local businesses. We've been approached by Bronx notable bookstores that are like, oh, that could be a cool location or a physical location, or there's conversations about a community like a community cafe, or maybe air some job training components where young people get to work as a barista, and also I think of groups like Fannie Lou Hander Freedom High School. Could they rent that location for some student appreciation event, something like that? So there's a lot of flexibility there. This one represents a location where we don't have final plans, but we're much further along in the process, right? When you look at the next site, strategic site 2.2, we have a property that is suggesting a new public plaza, potentially green and learning. And on the inside, we're talking about artist workspaces, and maybe like recording groups, maybe some more retail helps us change the character of Bronx River Avenue, especially so close to the Westchester Avenue commercial corridor, sort of creating this plaza, and overall more creative space where folks can enjoy the waterfront from the east side as much as they can now from the west side of the river. All that said, one of the things I mentioned is that this building here, or this lot rather, we also consider in the report more thoroughly what would it look like to build housing on that site instead. And unlike the Westchester Avenue station, this one's a little bit more up in the air, right? This is our vision. This is what we've identified through the conversations we've had and the work we've done. But this is one of those ones that's going to need a bit more work. And so part of that next phase of looking at these properties will be, okay, at what point do we need to really nail down exactly what should these uses be? At what point in the coming years do we need to do a market analysis to see is this even feasible here, that sort of thing. So hopefully that helps a little bit. And then that third one, strategic site 3, just on the next slide again, is a lot more oriented towards commercial activity. And when I say commercial, I want to be clear, not necessarily retail activity, but commercial activity. Maybe there's sort of green manufacturing or food sorting that can help be distributed more locally. I think there's a lot to explore here, and I think that's where we want people's continued involvement and input. This is, I think above everything else, we see sites that currently are just holding scrap metal, and we think that there can be something better there. We have these sort of ideas around, making these sites sort of key sites and bringing the green economy to our area, especially like green industry and stuff. We also have ideas about a rooftop soccer field, which I think would be amazing. But there's more work to be done on those strategic steps.
Wanted to ask what's in that area currently?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So in the area currently are, and you can see a little bit here. It's hard to know what's inside there because it's just like corrugated fencing all around it. But in the report, and happy to share some of the photos with you or with anyone who's curious. We take a peek inside to these sites and we see cars. Some of them that are like, scrap metals, scaffolding.
Is there so there's all in like active industry, like industrial stuff there?
There are businesses, and I think part of it brings up an important point. We don't want to be in the interest of just in the way that we don't want to displace people from their homes in this community as part of this planning. We're also wary of displacing businesses, right? Especially if they're employing folks from the local area. That said, if there's an opportunity to pursue a new industry that is cleaner or otherwise, we would have to and want to engage the business owners who are oftentimes different from the landowners and sort of come together with those folks as well as, the work that we're all doing together to inform a vision like this, to say that, what does it look like if something were to change on this property? Now I'll say there are other properties like in strategic site 1, where those lots don't have any business, even if there really are just empty lots, and there are still plenty of those. But when we talk about some of the more underutilized lots, there may be that certain businesses are using them, and that it'll be continued work with New York City and with business owners and property owners in this area to have these conversations.
And the reason I asked that question, it'll back that up. I'm thinking maybe because the way I'm thinking of it is definitely different than what you're saying, but under the sound of it, if there's like industry that are utilizing gas, that was just sound like some people's concern, especially as a business on they're concerned maybe like that cross-contaminating their products or booze. It's specific, right? Or even if people like, if we make it affordable housing and they're selling to people what they're dealing with, I make it cause much bigger problem. That's just something you all don't want. The owners definitely don't want that. Like that's why I'm kind of asking this so we all got that problem. If that problem has to be over, we have to swing. Yeah. So factoring all of that stuff in, you gotta make sure it's safe. And other people with you all definitely run, but also the fact that you gotta make sure that there's nothing that could be a hazard. You really got to think when it comes to the air and everything amongst that surround area.
Right. And like we mentioned, this site, there's some discussion of what would affordable housing look like instead, like what would taller buildings. That would require rezoning. And if you're already rezoning those 2 properties, we might consider rezoning the other ones here as well too, because you're already putting the work in, and you wouldn't want to put, as you're suggesting, a new housing development less like only so far away from right now there's a paper recycling facility on Bronx River Avenue. So and paper recycling sounds like it's a really clean thing, but it isn't. It's a mess. Yeah. So your point is well taken for sure, and I think part of the reason we opted in this example to not show residential buildings was because of concerns like that. But it's a very good point. Sort of where do these changes take place? And just want to use this as an opportunity to remind folks that these are visions. These are sort of first draft ideas. I wouldn't even get to say that they're plans yet. You know what I mean? Because they a lot more work needs to be put in them. But the work that has been put into them at this point is illustrative of the things we've heard and seen and talking to people about what are the needs, what do people want to see, what would people be excited about, that sort of thing. Yeah, thank you for your question. Folks. There any other questions in the room here? All right. Any other questions on Zoom for folks? And if not, no worries. So if you could just go back to the next slide again, Shruti, we'll end it there. Again, the report is available online. Comments can be submitted via email to brownfields@ympj.org. I cannot thank you enough for spending your time with us today, both online and virtually. This meeting, I think Shruti mentioned it before. You guys aren't really in the shop, but this meeting is being recorded, so that'll be uploaded onto our project website as well. So if folks want this sort of quicker version of the report, they can do that. But we'll close it out here. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone on Zoom.